Hello and welcome to the Ibanez guys, where the force is Ibanez. Nah, I'm kidding. Ian was holding his, so I had to grab mine, and I decided to play a little joke with it. But no, for real, welcome to the Star Wars guys, where the force is family. I am Master Paul, joined once again by Ian, the headless guitarist. Mando on Fire should be joining us shortly, but in the meantime, we are finally back with Animation Friday. And we're finally getting into something that I've been talking about doing for the longest time. We're finally here. We are talking Star Wars Rebels. And real quick, I want to say hello to Mary Lanning. Thanks for joining. So, this is the spiritual successor. Hello, by the way, to Nova Vaughn. Thanks for joining. Star Wars Rebels is the next show that came from the mind of Dave Filoni after the Clone Wars was canceled on Cartoon Network, and it's the first show also that was released from specifically Disney Star Wars. And real quick, we're gonna go ahead and bring Mando on Fire in here, and I like the new setup, by the way.
Thank you. Courtesy to Darth Nader 98 who kind of helped me out with the setup.
Yeah. Who, by the way, I did send him the invite. Hopefully he is here soon.
Yep.
Just be aware, now that your bed is visible, Phil will get on you for making sure your pillows aren't fluffed military style.
Well, he can come in here and tell me that himself.
Fair enough.
You're not home, Michael, so you don't have to worry about that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Mary Lanning also says Star Wars Rebels is my favorite. And that's what we were talking about, Michael, while you came in. The fact that Rebels not only is the second show that we've ever gotten from Dave Filoni in regards to Star Wars, but it's the first piece of visual media that we ever got from Star Wars after Disney purchased it. So cast your minds back to 2014. Disney has bought Lucasfilm. Disney has announced that they're going to make episode 7 and a new trilogy with that. But it's going to take time for them to do that. And so what do they do in the meantime? They release a cartoon called Star Wars Rebels. So I have two questions. We're only talking about the two-parter Spark of Rebellion tonight. So as always, what did you think of these two episodes? But also, as a first impression of what Disney Star Wars was going to bring us, how do you think Rebels did? And Ian, you can go first.
Well, when we say Disney Star Wars, are we counting season 7 Clone Wars?
Yes.
We are. Okay. With the exception of season 7 Clone Wars, I'm going to start by saying I think Rebels is the best Star Wars that Disney's ever given us. It has its faults, but I think it's better than the trilogy and it's better than the Solo movie. Actually, I just thought of the Kenobi series. I know you attack me, whatever. I am actually I thought the Kenobi series was pretty cool for the most part. So maybe tied with Kenobi. No, Rebels is still better than Kenobi. So those two episodes, they definitely, to me, they represent what the rest of Rebels is, what it turns into later on. The show has Disney's fingerprints on it for sure, but it's not by any means as bad as the trilogy. So when it comes to those episodes in particular, they do stay true to Star Wars tradition in that stormtroopers still can't hit anything for the life of them.
True.
And I don't know, they're basically just bucket heads with blasters that don't know where to shoot.
Fair enough.
And Yeah, so I think there's a couple complaints I have with Rebels, and that number one, the animation on Darth Vader could be better
Okay.
on his helmet. I think. I love the animation we got the last episode of Clone Wars season 7, where Vader appears at that last section and picks up Ahsoka's lightsaber. I think the animation on him there was awesome. They should have went with something like that. I think. Um, so just a few gripes with that. Characters, I really like Ezra. I really like Kanan. I could, I don't know, Sabine and Hera kind of strike me as Ray type characters where they're basically good at everything and they never say anything wrong and they never do anything wrong. And I've seen the whole show, so they kind of give me that impression.
Okay.
So gripes and complaints there, but no, overall it's a good season. I do a good show, rather I should say. I do watch it regularly. So
Okay. I gotcha. Michael, what about you? Actually, real quick before you go, there's another guest I got to bring on, and that being Darth Nader 98. What's up? You're muted. While he's unmuting himself, I'll go ahead. I'll read this that Nova just said in the chat. If they did the writing in the sequel trilogy in the same style of Rebels, maybe the sequel trilogy would have been somewhat better. Maybe.
yes,
Maybe, yep.
I can see that. I can definitely get on board with that.
Yeah. Everything working on your end, Nate?
And it's working now.
Yeah, you're
Little
quiet,
soft,
but we can hear you.
Okay, let's. Any better?
Yeah, that is a
Yeah.
little
Yep.
better.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
So Michael, back to you. Again, the question is, what do you think of these two episodes? And what do you think of these two episodes as the first impression, at least from a visual media standpoint, of what Disney Star Wars was going to give us?
So, tackling the first two episodes first, I thought this was a rather strong introduction, and I'm glad that they took time to make it into a two-parter, just because, as we'll see later in the show, and I say this as someone who's already watched the show from cover to cover, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
the show definitely goes deeper into areas that we really wouldn't expect, where I'm not going to share any details on what specifically those are because spoilers, but
Of
you'll
course.
definitely get to see a lot of interesting things on this kind of show. Now, with that being said, I don't really remember how I felt at first, other than when they had first announced it. I thought, okay, cool. And then when I actually started watching it, when it was first airing on Disney XD, I was kind of into it, especially towards the ending of this in particular season, which we'll get to that later.
Right. Because when I was first watching it, I, of course, by this point was overseas in Bahrain. I didn't have cable like you did, so I had to buy it on iTunes to watch it.
Yeah.
But you had the ability to actually tune in weekly and watch it, correct?
Yes. Now, of course, that said, I think I fell off for some reason after that, but I don't really remember what the case was. But I guess I kind of took it as like any other Star Wars fan, where at the time I really didn't think of anything like Disney Star Wars versus Lucas Star Wars. It was just Star Wars for me.
Right. Because at least back then, there really was no reason to think of it as Lucas Star Wars versus Disney Star Wars. Certainly not on the scale that it is today. Yeah, you might have had the diehard expanded universe fans that would have been upset because I believe by this point they had announced that the EU was no longer a thing. And so, yeah, you would have had those fans upset. but the casuals, they
Yeah.
wouldn't have had a reason to complain because really at this point there wasn't one.
Yeah. Now, with that being said, I think this is the part where there's something of a divide between Star Wars fans where it's become like a meme, and that is again the animation style where I think some of it
Yeah.
works, but then some of it looks just outright goofy. Like I could probably make a rough mold with Play-Doh in 10 seconds and make some of the stuff that's in Rebels look like a bunch
Right.
of chicken scratch, but with that being said, the animation itself isn't terrible. I just think that there's some things that work with it and some things that don't.
Okay. Nate, moving on to you. What do you think of these two episodes, the two-parter Spark or Rebellion? What do you think of them by themselves? And also, what do you think of them as, from a visual media standpoint, the first impression of what we were going to get from Disney Star Wars?
So, of course, I do come kind of in that gray area between your experiences where you were viewing it kind of while stationed overseas and
Mm-hmm.
Michael being in elementary, middle school?
Pretty sure I was in middle school at the time. I
Had to have
don't
been.
really remember.
Okay, so that would have been about roughly the same time equivalency of me for the Clone Wars TV show back in the day.
Right. If my math is right, you would have been in your at the tail end of your sophomore, going into your junior year.
I remember I was somewhere in high school. I didn't really know what was going on. Actually, I still don't know what's going on in the world.
It's okay. Then again, we go underground for about 8 hours a day.
Sometimes longer.
That is true.
Yeah, at least you didn't have to deal with choir people. But then again, you had to, Nate.
Should we
Trust
tell
me,
them?
trust me. He had to deal
Okay,
with choir
back on-
people. I was one of them.
What are you talking about? I was one myself. But back on topic. So to me, really, Rebels. It was a little bit more kiddish by that time to me.
Mhm.
Yes.
But looking back on it now, and also having a little bit of a first impression then, and kind of understanding and thinking about it, where was Clone Wars when I was a kid? So I kind of looked at it. Okay, I've got to somewhat lower my expectations. And the number two, this is Disney. At that time, Disney really wasn't getting too aggressive with anything at that point in time.
No.
Yeah, they were still keeping up with the family-friendly brand that they've had since pretty much the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Now, as far as the art style itself, I was a little bit of that Star Wars nerd, and I'd seen I was something about the Dream a few million times by that point because it really came on like History Channel and Discovery Channel. So I was really familiar with Ralph McQuarrie's work, especially a lot of this drawing. So I really appreciated that nod to the previous era. And I just kind of enjoyed it throughout. Yes, I had to look at it like, does it really fit? Clone Wars was better, but I grew up with that. That's my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as Spark of the Rebellion goes, I really do like it's very fun and light in the beginning, but also you're getting to see the darker side and realities of this is war and this is also the criminal underside of things.
And
Yeah.
then
Really,
we've
not-
got
rebels aren't the good guys.
and then we've got Star Wars Aladdin, basically.
Yes.
Yes, Star
and
Wars
we'll-
Aladdin. Mr.
We'll get into
Bridger.
all of those characters in just a moment. So, my take on all of this, again, casting my mind back to 2014, I watched Spark of the Rebellion and all of season 1 when it came out on iTunes. And while I did enjoy it, I definitely thought back then that it was a distinct downgrade from Clone Wars, both in design and tone. That I could tell that Disney had their fingerprints back then over this entire over this entire show. And I can't really share any examples of that right this second, because that would spoil future episodes that we haven't talked about yet. But I could just tell that this was going to be, at least from what I knew of season 1, a more lighthearted journey than what the Clone Wars was, because the Clone Wars certainly had a more gritty, more mature style of animation, especially after they changed animation styles in season 3. And in Rebels back then, everything just looked smoother and friendlier. And yeah, I get the whole thing of a lot of it taking inspiration from what Ralph McQuarrie's original designs. But I didn't know who Ralph McQuarrie was back then. I know I'm a bad Star Wars fan, but I didn't know who it was back then, and so judging it basically by what I saw, I didn't like it. Now, how do I think about it now? I largely think the same, that I do think animation-wise it is a bit of a downgrade from the Clone Wars, both in tone and atmosphere. However, in watching these 2 episodes, there is an element to this that I picked up on that completely escaped me last time, and that is the fact that Rebels managed to perfectly capture the tone and atmosphere of the original trilogy, specifically A New Hope. And so I have to applaud it for that. What do you guys think?
I never thought about it like that. Now that you mention it, I could definitely see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where, again, look at A New Hope, the very first Star Wars movie. It is a lighthearted adventure, go rescue the princess from the evil empire and destroy the Death Star. That has its lighthearted moments for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yet it also has its dark moments too. For example, seeing Grand Moff Tarkin blow up the entirety of Alderaan. And then here in Star Wars Rebels, you have the lighthearted banter between the crew of the Ghost, but then you also have the dark reality that Lothal is really being held under the thumbprints of the Empire, and you see these poor parts of the town where literally Imperial officers are just harassing people just trying to make a living just because they're bored. Which, side note, I made a meme about those two Imperial officers. You'll only get this if you've seen both Star Wars Rebels and Prince of Egypt, but I had to make this meme as I was watching.
If nothing else, they fit the body types.
Yeah, they do.
You're not wrong.
And I can say that because I'm a fat guy too.
I think we're all a little fluffy.
Yes. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the first, real quick. Mary Lanning says, watch Empire of Dreams documentary. It tells the making of all 3 movies. I have never seen that. If I can find it, I will watch it.
And if I'm not mistaken, it does also go into the prequels a little bit. Because it was around that time the prequels were coming out.
Right. Yeah, I will definitely look that up and watch it, and who knows, maybe we'll even talk about it here on the channel. But with that, let's go ahead and get into the first topic, and that is, of course, the story. So, right away, we're introduced to the concept of the Inquisitors, because we see, and yes, I know I'm trying to break the habit of going over these beat by beat, but I kind of have to this time, because because really this story overall is just a 2-part episode introduction of the characters. So I kind of have to go beat by beat for this one. So anyways, like I said, we get a HoloNet call between Darth Vader, who I was surprised was actually being voiced by James Earl Jones here, and the Grand Inquisitor. and this is our first introduction to the to basically the Inquisitorius. Now, knowing what we know now, we know a lot about the Inquisitorius. We know that there's lots of them, and they've appeared in multiple different medias. They've appeared, of course, in Rebels. They've appeared in books like the Ahsoka novel. They've appeared in Tales of the Jedi. They've appeared in Jedi Fallen Order, and they've appeared in Kenobi. Controversially, that is. So this was our first glance at them, but at the same time, that's all it was a glance at the Grand Inquisitor. We have no idea within these 2 episodes what he's capable of. Just that he works directly for Darth Vader and he is tasked with hunting down Jedi. So when you guys first were introduced to the Grand Inquisitor, what did you guys think of him?
Well, he
Well,
certainly wasn't pretty.
No, he's not.
I
well,
thought he'd be an interesting kind of, I guess, B villain in terms of the overall franchise as a whole.
Uh-huh.
yeah. I would say, well, I'm gonna have to choose my words carefully because there's a lot of things about him that I would want to talk about, including some details about his design, but we can get to that a little bit later.
Of course.
But I would say just the very idea that, well, at the time, I only thought that he was it. He was the Inquisitor, like the only one.
Yeah, that's kind of the
Which,
impression that I got with him too.
I can
which
agree with that.
means, which I would say that even though he's not as powerful as Vader, obviously that's not somebody you would want to mess with because, again, at the time, we thought that he was the only one.
Yeah. What about you, Ian? When you first saw the Grand Inquisitor in these episodes, what did you think of him?
Well, first of all, I was excited to see the first like 30 seconds of the the show with Darth Vader's face. I thought, okay, well, they're on the right track here if they're introducing him, animation aside. But then seeing the Inquisitor, I thought, like y'all did, I unlike y'all, I did not watch this show when it first came out. I started getting into it a couple years ago, so it was not watching it as it came out like most of y'all did. Um, but when I saw the Inquisitor, it was, or the Grand Inquisitor, I should say, I thought he was the only one, and it seemed to put a darker feel to the show before it opened up into that more lighthearted section that you were talking about, PJ. But
Yes.
it opens with that. His design, his suit, his even his voice. His voice isn't really deep like Darth Vader's, but it's still kind of creepy sounding.
You're right.
It has an
And
eeriness to it.
and I got to mention something else about his character as a whole. And yes, this is going to be sort of touching on the future episodes of season 1 that we're not on yet, but look at how he is portrayed in all aspects of how he's portrayed, how he carries himself, how he fights. It's like they took a piece of all other dark side characters that were made before him and put them into the Grand Inquisitor. He carries himself very regally, like Count Dooku, and even
Yeah.
fights at times like Count Dooku, yet when he needs to, he can play the mind games like Vader and the Emperor, and he can be an outright savage like Darth Maul.
Yeah, and I would also
Yeah.
say that it's a good choice on Disney's part to actually make him an Otapawan, I believe is what
A
the
Powan.
species. A Pawan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's just based on the look that we got from uh, episode 3 and now seeing it in animation. It looks good. In fact, this is one of those things where the animation for Rebels actually works in this case.
I agree. And we can't talk about the Grand Inquisitor without addressing it. He looks 10 times. This is okay. So, of all of the characters that started out in animation but crossed over into live action in Star Wars, it's not always gone well. Bo-Katan translates amazingly to live action. Ahsoka translates amazingly to live action as
With
long
some
as you don't question.
accommodations.
Yeah, with some accommodations, which is understandable. By
I
contrast,
think that's a little debatable, but keep going.
the Grand Inquisitor did not translate well to animation. To live action. Mostly, in fact, entirely due to his design. And this is a debate that we had back when Kenobi was fresh off the press, but we'll go ahead and revisit it here. I know that Disney has tried to pride itself, at least with certain projects, to use practical effects where they can, but you had to have. But I'm sorry, they needed to make the Grand Inquisitor in Kenobi with CGI and make him at least a little bit closer to what he was in animation, because that looked horrendous.
The red around his eyes was barely visible. It wasn't.
Exactly.
It wasn't. It's like somebody just said, "Oh, just paint his face white and make him bald. It'll be fine." No,
Yeah,
nobody.
and paint two weird arrow things coming down on his forehead like this.
Yeah, yeah. I think he played the part well. I think they just could have done a much better job on the makeup.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think the actor did great with what he was given. He just looked terrible.
Now, having said that, nothing against the live action actor. I do like taking into consideration voice acting, the live action actor, appearances of both of them. I do like the Grand Inquisitor and Rebels better.
Yes.
So,
yeah, to me,
there's that.
Yeah, to me, that's not even a question. What about you guys? Anything that you want to say about the Grand Inquisitor in Rebels versus Kenobi?
Well, what could be said other than, I don't know, nothing but a bunch of grabbed pieces of amphibian.
I hear you.
I'm not gonna
We
say
have-
I'm not gonna say it because.
Okay. Go ahead, Nate.
We have modern AI graphical enhancing technology that could have made already decent and great special effects as historically Star Wars has had from a practical standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
even better.
That is true. But anyways, we don't need to belabor the point. Like I said, this is a topic we've already talked about. So let's get back to the story. Immediately after this conversation, we come to the planet of Lothal, which I would have to say, is probably one of my top 5 favorite planets in all of Star Wars, just visually. Like that looks like yes, it's more rural than other planets like Coruscant, but I don't know, I just like how it looks.
Have you seen it toward the end?
You mean at the end of the show?
At the end of the series?
No.
No, just wait.
Remember, for me, just like with the Clone Wars, I only got about 1.5 seasons in before something else grabbed my attention and I never came back to it. So this, just like with Clone Wars, is me watching the series all the way through for the first time. And real quick, Mary Lanning says, I love Jason Isaac playing the voice of the Inquisitor. Yes, he did an amazing job.
Yes, he really did. I think all the voice actors did, but the Inquisitor's among the top ones.
Absolutely.
He did awesome.
But anyways, on Lothal, like I said, we find out just how the Empire treats its average everyday citizen. And one of these citizens we meet is a young boy named Ezra Bridger.
Or Aladdin.
Yeah, Basically, this first whole act is the one jump ahead musical number from Aladdin, where he's like, gotta eat to live, gotta steal to eat, one jump ahead of the hitman, etc., etc. He basically tricks the Imperials into answering a false call down the street, yet and it seems like he's helping a fruit vendor, yet he's stealing fruit from the vendor. But as he's watching the Imperials run around with like chickens with their heads cut off trying to answer this call, he senses something. And I won't say yet, but just remember that he senses something. And he sees this group of people he had never seen before stealing crates from the Empire. And they're going about it in like a super professional manner, like they've done this before. And he decides, you know what? I'm going to take their loot because I bet I can sell it and get some money for myself. So what happens is basically a three-way chase where Ezra is being chased by both the crew of the Ghost and the Empire, and the crew of the Ghost are simultaneously trying to protect Ezra as well as get back their stolen goods, which we later find out are blasters. And real quick, Nova says something interesting in the chat. I didn't pick up on this, and I wonder if you guys did. Ezra used a Jedi mind trick and didn't know it.
I don't know how I feel about that one. That seems...
When does that happen, Nova? Because I'm blanking out on that.
I don't know. I don't think so yet. I think it's just some Imperial trying to follow protocol or something.
Yeah, if anything, he's just doing a good impression of an Imperial officer. But anyways, Ezra ends up in trouble, and the crew of the Ghosts ends up having to save him by taking him onto their ship. And they deliver the stolen weapons in exchange for food to a smuggler named Vizago. I believe he is a Deveronian, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds about right.
Plausible.
Yeah, but anyways, it's here that we meet each member of the Ghost crew and kind of learn basically what they're about. So the first one that we meet is, of course, the leader, Kanan Jarrus. Now, there is an aspect to Kanan that, yes, we learn about later on, but I'm going to save that for later. So for all intents and purposes, Kanan Jarrus is the leader of what appears to be a smuggling group who is good with his fists, good with a blaster, and quick on his feet. So when you guys first saw Kanan, number one, what did you think of him just at face value? And number two, did you suspect what was revealed about him later?
Honestly, didn't really think much about him.
I
Okay.
actually, from the moment where Ezra has his spidey senses going off, for lack of a better term there,
Of course.
I'm like, there's got to be some force connection with this dude. And of course, it's like, okay, maybe both of them do. Is this one of the ways that masters and Padawans picked each other? Could this have been the
Maybe.
way the Jedi Order of old? I'm talking well before the one responsible for ruining the Republic. What?
Yeah. I could see that. Ian, what do you think?
I'm with Nate. When I saw the connection, I was like, okay, something's going on here. There's more to this dude than meets the eye. He's not
Okay.
just good with a blaster. He's better than Obi-Wan with a blaster for a reason.
Well, truthfully, I had the reveal spoiled for me because I had seen a clip from a future episode where he's fighting against the Inquisitor, so I already knew. But casting that from my mind, this initial meeting with him, they do a good job of showing that there's an aspect of himself that he's hiding. But anyways, the next character we meet is Zeb, the I believe he's called a Lasat.
Yes, he's a
Yes.
Yes,
Lasat. And can we call him
and
Zebarelius?
Gar-
Feel free
Garazello?
to.
Gareth Zebarelios, that's what it
Yep.
is. That's his full name, but everyone just calls him Zeb. And clearly he is the muscle of the group. And what did you guys think when you at first met him?
I thought he's a
thought that
purple
his-
Chewbacca that speaks English.
As well as
It's
I
funny-
thought that his
English.
weapon and his pew pew looked cool.
Yeah.
You know, where he says a semi-hairless Chewbacca that speaks English, Ian, I think you might have spoiled something for later on in the show. He's also a rare hairless Wookiee.
That's what they try to pass him off as. But it's fun. But for real though, it's funny that you say that, Ian, because what ended up becoming the design for Zeb actually was an early design for Chewie back when Ralph McQuarrie was still doing all of the designs for A New Hope. And it was about Anakin Starkiller versus Luke Skywalker. Which, by the way, if you've never read Star Wars Infinities, they have a comic of what Star Wars originally would have looked like. Definitely check it out. In fact, Michael, I believe you still have a copy of that.
I don't remember where I put it, but actually, never mind. I think I do.
Okay. The next character we meet is a Mandalorian girl named Sabine. And before I learned what ended up happening with Kanan, Sabine was immediately my favorite member of the gang from the standpoint of, oh my god, that's a Mandalorian, and they're one of the good guys now. So that's cool because, again, having not seen all of the Clone Wars by this point, I had only seen Mandalorians be villains, in Jango Fett and Boba Fett. And so here's Sabine, and she's one of the good guys, and I was immediately a fan of that. What do you guys think?
I think the way that they introduced her and how very obvious of how Ezra feels about her is, I mean, it's done right, even though it's obvious.
Mm-hmm.
I would say. Which I was about to. Never mind.
What about you, Nate?
So again, I had seen most all of the Clone Wars at that time. Of course, season 7 didn't exist then, so discount that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes,
yeah,
he did.
Nova's right. To be honest, I was around that same age group where it's like, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Ironically, that's me now with Bo-Katan, but I digress. But I thought it was okay, really cool twist. A young Mandalorian who seemed to be fairly artsy, which ironically fits for a Mandalorian, at least with her style of armor and what we see with her later on.
Yeah. And then I don't know what it is about the fact that she is a part-time graffiti artist, but I think it works.
It does. And it kind of reminds me, there's a scene where she uses her graffiti as explosives, and it reminds me a lot of the Arkham games where Batman uses his explosive
yeah.
gel and paints the bat symbol on a weak wall and explodes it like that. So then the next oh, by the way, Ian, you haven't said anything about Sabine.
You don't want to hear what I have to say. If you like her, you don't want to hear what I have to say.
Come on, this is an open panel. You can say what you want.
She's one of the characters I dislike. She is one of the characters that seems to me to have Disney's fingerprints on her pretty strongly. She never does anything wrong. She never says anything wrong. She never messes up. She's good at everything.
The only thing she's missing is some. Well, actually, no. She has the complete package
Exactly.
because
So-
of
Wait, her
the
mom's still
wildly
alive.
colored hair.
So
Wildly colored hair.
and
But at the same time, Michael, the whole wildly colored hair thing, that that was before that became a stereotype for a certain class of person. But sorry, Ian, go ahead.
Well, but I'm speaking from this perspective. I've seen the whole show, so I know how she is through the whole show, and she's just kind of, I don't know. To me, she comes across as pretty. Stop it, Nova. I'm here to stay.
Mm,
Okay.
don't worry, I got a solution.
I'm kidding, Ian. Go
Um,
ahead.
So, yeah, I gotta
Don't
say
worry, I
she's
got a
probably my.
solution.
You do? Bring it on.
Nah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Back on topic.
I'm gonna get my emotional support band out.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I think she's probably my least favorite character for that reason. She's a lot like Rey, and but to be honest, I don't really like Mandalorians in general because they all pretty well come across as brats for the most part. I mean,
I see.
you know, it seems like every one of them is a jerk to some extent. Even Bo-Katan is pretty much, you know, Bo-Katan and the interactions between Bo-Katan and Ahsoka are pretty one-sided. I think the only Mandalorian I liked was Duchess Satine. Was that her name?
Yeah.
She was the only one I liked. Everybody else is pretty hard to get along with. So
I understand.
I don't know.
And Michael, you said in the private chat you gotta go. So anything you want to say before you get out of here?
Yes. Nate. Happy birthday.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Apparently, it is my birthday today.
Today is Nate's birthday. Ian, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Can you fire that thing up and play a metal version of Happy Birthday?
It's gonna come through clean, but let's
That's
see
fine.
here.
Well, here,
Let's
use your
see here.
DSL.
Oh, it's 9:45. Everybody's in bed.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Yay! Happy birthday, Nate.
Danke. And that's
Happy
all the
birthday,
German I
dude.
know.
Now let me ask you this: how much of this have you done today in celebration?
None. I'm saving that till after.
Oh, fun. Okay. Well, anyways, getting back on topic, the last character that we meet, well, last non-droid character that is Hera Syndulla, the pilot and love interest of Kanan Jarrus. And I want to mention this, that when I first watched this episode, I didn't realize that they had already established that Kanan and Hera were in a relationship, but I caught it this time around where Hera outright calls Kanan her love. So I thought that was a nice detail that they threw in.
Oh, I must have missed that. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Huh.
So Ian, I'll go ahead and go with you first. You already said you don't like her, but let me ask you this one. Between the two, which one can you tolerate more? Sabine or Hera?
Hera, definitely. Yeah. I can tolerate Hera much more. She
Okay.
seems to have, I mean, she has a lot of the attributes Sabine does, but she also has some stuff Sabine doesn't. Some characteristics, like towards Ezra, she kind of has, for lack of a better word, a motherly kind of characteristic from time to time. So I can kind of get behind that. I tolerate that. So yeah, Hera's got Disney's fingerprints on her too, but not to the point I don't think that Sabine does.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Nate, what about you? What was your first impression of Hera?
Okay, she's the pilot, and I think I caught in my first time viewing it that she did sit there and call Kanan love, but I didn't think anything of it until my second or third time watching through the series.
right?
Um, yeah, I can kind
And
of agree where Ian's coming from. Disney had her hands, and she's definitely the mom of the group.
yes, and if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time that we have a Twi'lek character as like a part of the main everyday cast. The closest we had gotten before this was Ayla Secura in the episodes that she was featured in the Clone Wars, but there was like 3 of those.
And then I think, no, Cham was a B character, realistically.
Yes, he was.
And one other thing, her
hmm
accent as a Twi'lek.
That we can't comment on that without spoiling episodes from season 2, so put a pin in that one. So yeah, basically, like I said, this whole episode is just an introduction to all of these characters, who they are, and what they're about, and how they work well together as a team. And we see that they are incredibly loyal to each other, and that loyalty, even though he's not part of the team yet, that loyalty transfers over to even Ezra, because there's a point where they accidentally walk into a trap aboard an Imperial transport ship, and Ezra ends up getting captured by an ISB agent named Agent Callus. And think about it. They could have just left him there since he wasn't part of the team yet. They got out alive. They found out it was a trap. They had a job to do, and he very well, if they had a hard heart, could have just been considered collateral damage. But that's not what they did. And I really like the conversation before this that Hera had with Ezra, basically saying that leaving people behind and looking out for ourselves is not what we do, which does not compute to Ezra at all, because having no parents, that's all his life had been. But Hera's points were making it through into Ezra's mind. And that was a great scene where he's like, I don't believe you that it's right to look out for others. That's why I can't believe I'm about to do everything you tell me.
Hmm. Well, not all of them wanted to go back and get him, though.
That is true. Sabine
Severelius.
and Zeb didn't. Well,
Yeah.
Zeb didn't because he didn't like Ezra. Sabine didn't because she thought it would be a suicide mission. So it's important to state that the reasons were different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there's a scene in the middle of the episode. I'm kind of going out of order here. There was a scene in the middle of the episode where Ezra is sneaking around the ship, the Ghost, which, side note, by the way, the Ghost is my favorite Star Wars ship of all time as far as designs. Like, if I was to have a Star Wars ship of my own, it would be that, because it's big enough to hold plenty of cargo and be a comfortable enough living space for a small group of people, yet it's small enough to where it's easily maneuverable.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, isn't the Ghost from the same manufacturer and therefore a cousin to a very famous YT 1300 class freighter?
I'm not 100% sure on that one. If someone's watching this that's more knowledgeable about Star Wars than we are, feel free to leave it in the comments or in the chat whether or not the Millennium Falcon and the Ghost were made by the same people. But Ian, you know what, let's talk about the Ghost. What did you guys think about that ship when you first saw it and first saw it in action? And I want to especially hear this from you, Nate, being the aviation passion that you have.
Well, she's not the buff, and she's definitely not a Mustang or Spitfire.
No, she's not an
I
X-Wing.
I would akin the Ghost more along the lines, of course, just going off historical military aviation, specifically the U.S.,
Mm-hmm.
I was more along the lines of like the A-26 or even the AD-1 Sky Raider.
Okay. I'm going to look up what those are real quick.
One should be a twin-engine bird, I believe, made by Martin, and the other one should be a single-engine prop job that was actually Navy in origin.
Okay,
And
the
was
Douglas A1 Skyrider. Let me pull that up real quick.
Sky Raider. Sky Raider.
So there it is.
Oh wow, it's been a while since I've seen one of those. Yeah,
She can
yeah,
throw
that's cool.
everything at you, to include the kitchen sink, pull well above her weight class to a point where I think some militaries were using her all the way up into like the 1980s. And
Yeah.
like it was better than F-15s, F-16s, FA-18s, F-14s, Phantom 2s, all the big iconic stuff. And to be quite honest, it did
And then
literally at one point throw a toilet at
what
the
was the
enemy.
other one you said it was?
The A-26, I believe it's the Invader.
A26 Invader.
Okay, I've
Yep,
seen
here
these
it
two.
is.
Yeah,
I could see that being a better analogy to what the Ghost is
In terms of the
personally.
overall size, I have to agree that the Invader is much more of what the Ghost is. But in terms of the capabilities from a military standpoint, it's more along the lines of the A1. Because I
Right.
mean, it even did electronic warfare.
Mm-hmm. And Nova Von's right. She's got it where it counts. It's not the Falcon, but it's fast.
And I did look it up on Wikipedia. Both the YT-1300 and the modified VCX-100,
Mm-hmm.
which is the Ghost, and the
Yes.
Falcon, were both made by the Corellian Engineering Corporation.
Okay. Then that makes sense then, because they do share some design motifs. Nate, sorry, Ian, what about you? What did you think of their ship and its capabilities as shown?
uh, I thought it was very very similar to the Millennium Falcon, having the top gunning platform, or the rotary cannon, I guess it is, and then
Mhm.
isn't there one underneath as well?
I don't think so. I think it's to the.
Just
I think it's a fore and aft one.
okay.
Mm,
But spoiler alert: my favorite capability that it has is the Phantom.
Yes, the detachable
Yeah,
shuttlecraft.
I really like
you mean the
that.
Goblin?
Yeah,
Yep.
That's a cool. That's another aviation reference right there.
yeah,
And
pretty cool.
we see, spoiler alert for a future episode, we see them pull a certain maneuver with that shuttle that is unlike anything we had seen to that point as far as hyperspace travel. So yeah, like I said, I love the Ghost. If I was to own a Star Wars ship, it would be that. But anyways, while Ezra is exploring the Ghost, he comes across Kanan's quarters and is looking through his drawers and happens upon two interesting items. A random cube
Wonder
and
what that could be.
what seems to be some form of weapon hilt. And he picks up the weapon hilt, and a blue blade emerges from it. And so basically that's our confirmation, without quite seeing it yet, that Kanan is a Jedi. And at the end of part 2, of course, we do get that full confirmation where he reveals himself as a Jedi in the midst of battle and uses his lightsaber to hold off the Imperials as they rescue Wookiees from Kessel. So, we already talked about Kanan, and we already talked about how you guys at least suspected that he was a Jedi. I had it spoiled for me. What did you think of how they revealed it?
I, hmm. I, I mean, I thought it was pretty epic.
Yeah,
but to me, I kind of already suspected it. So when he did it, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I knew it. It
yeah,
wasn't really like a special moment for me. It was just I already really strongly suspected it. So it was pretty cool the way they did it, though.
it was. I will be right back. I'm going to see if I can try and find my holocron because it has to do with this review. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, so now we should just take over the channel.
Okay, let's do that.
Too bad neither one of us has admin controls right now.
That's why Michael should have stayed, right? We could bribe him into the three of us taking over.
Or just the two of us. We overtake Michael.
I think the two of us could take him.
Yeah.
Why is his picture what it is? That's funny. Is that his avatar or whatever you call it? Did he make that, or is that just some random guy that he likes from a movie?
I think that was somebody who made a caricature of him through some kind of AI.
Okay.
I guess we could look
Yes,
through the chat.
that you're talking about my profile picture.
Yes.
That's something that Crit made. But anyways, I found it. So, like I said, not only did Ezra find a lightsaber, he also found one of these, a holocron. And the reason I grabbed this is because there's a certain voice line that this thing says that comes from this episode. So, Ezra keeps the holocron on him pretty much the whole time, not knowing what it is, but clearly seeing that there's some form of value to it. And when he's imprisoned by the Imperials, he still has the holocron on him, and frustratedly he throws it against the wall, but then sits down to calm himself down, and he notices that the holocron starts to open. And all of a sudden, hopefully this thing's battery is charged, he hears, hopefully this plays through, he hears
This is Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. I regret to report that both our Jedi Order and the Republic have fallen, with the dark shadow of the Empire rising to take their place.
Okay, so that's not the full thing, but you guys get the point. Oh, and by the way, when we get to the portion of Rebels where we meet the Bendu, then I think it's time for another demonstration where we get this with Michael's Sith holocron and show you what happens when we put them together. So,
yes.
So yeah, something to look forward to when we get to season 3.
I think you're talking about the wrong extra person. I think it's when he meets another red and black fellow with some fancy horns and a cane.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I think they called him Old Master.
Something like that. But yeah, something to look forward to. Like I said, when we get to season 3 of this show, you will see this pop back up.
And also, speaking of the holocron, something that I just thought about that was a bit of as big as that thing is, and that Callus said to sit there and search him and take his possessions. How in the world did Ezra sneak that past the stormtroopers? I mean, you were a corrections officer.
Truthfully, I have no clue. So I'm going to say, and you'll understand what I mean by this, Nate, because you hear me say it all the time with Trevor, but somehow Palpatine returned.
Yes.
Basically, that's my go-to line now for those that don't know at work. If we're talking about something from any form of show, video game that just does not, no matter what, make sense, I just say somehow Palpatine returned. And real quick, I got to shout out my friend, the Matt Cave, who just popped in the chat, who says, hello there. Sorry I couldn't join tonight. Rebels is such an awesome series. That's all right, man. You will have the invite every week. And I'll go ahead and tell you now, right now, we're covering the first 2 episodes, at least as listed on Disney Plus, Spark of Rebellion. Next week, let me pull it up so I can tell you for sure. Next week, we are talking about episodes 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that is Droids in Distress, Fighter Flight, Rise of the Old Masters. I'm looking forward to that one. And Breaking Ranks. So if you're able to get those episodes watched, Matt Cave, you're certainly welcome to join us next week. So anyways, getting back to the story, kind of wrapping it all up because we've been going for about an hour now. The episode ends with them dropping Ezra off on Lothal, and Ezra had just swiped Kanan's lightsaber. And yet Ezra still feels that tug in the back of his mind, knowing you can't just stay here. There's a whole other galaxy out there for you and a whole new world to learn about in the Force. And Ezra senses that Kanan had followed him, and he just asks, "What is the Force?" And we get the classic Obi-Wan line that he said in A New Hope. The Force is an energy field that is created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, and binds the galaxy together. And notice what wasn't said there. No mention of midichlorians, which, as someone that grew up with the prequels, I have to confess I was disappointed with.
Well, it's just an introductory statement, so I don't really let that bother me too much because, I mean, he asked, as a kid who's just asking a question, you don't want to like overwhelm him with too much information, do you?
Yeah, you know what,
I
now
don't
that I
know.
think about it, I guess that's right. Where the whole it's an energy field explanation, that's like the little nugget of truth.
Yeah.
The midichlorians is like deep diving the study of it.
I mean, the answer that was given was pretty in depth to begin with. So
Yeah. It's like if it's like saying, "Hey, why did Jesus come?" Reciting John 3:16 is basically summing it up in a sentence,
exactly,
whereas going through the entire 4 gospels is deep diving it.
exactly. Yeah. So it's at, yeah, yep.
And real quick, Matt Cave says, "Much appreciated. I remember watching Spark of the Rebellion when it first came out loud. I said, wow, this feels like Star Wars." Yeah. In fact, I said that earlier in this stream, Matt Cave, where watching it tonight in preparation for this show, I had watched it when it came out back in 2014 and thought that it was kind of a downgrade from Clone Wars. And while I do still in certain aspects believe that, I did notice this time around watching it that it really did capture the spirit specifically of A New Hope. But anyways, Nate, as far as the whole midichlorians yes or no thing, where do you stand on that?
Honestly, we're at a time period in the Jedi Order's history and really the Jedi as a whole where, well, number one, you don't have the ability to test if anyone has midichlorians, at least, uh, Dan, what's his name again?
Qui-Gon.
No, not, yeah, kind of like the device that Qui-Gon had, but also I am blanking on Kanan. There we go. He doesn't have
Yes,
that ability to check that, and as we learn later on, he never completed the Jedi trials to become a
that is
knight, let
true.
alone a master.
Which
So
he does eventually, and I know that is a moment that's coming later in season 2. I've seen the clip. I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
so that could also be an important reason, as he might not have been far enough along in his studies to understand kind of how to tell that to someone. And it really doesn't matter in the context of this is someone's first exposure to the Force and really to the wider galaxy as a whole. All Ezra has known is basically being uh, rat that's running through the streets of Lothal.
That is true. So ultimately, we knew what was going to happen. Ezra decides, okay, take me with you to Alderaan. There's nothing for me here. I want to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father. That's not actually what he said, but it's symbolic of it. It's like
Look at this.
it's like
Matt,
poetry. It rhymes.
Matt
And even
literally
Matt
just
Cage, like he's the Aladdin of Star Wars. Nice to know that we're on the same page as far as that goes.
Michael's talking about that when he was in here, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Yes, he said the exact same thing.
It would have
So
been even funnier if whoever did the sound mixing for Rebels mixed in some of the music from Aladdin with the classic Star Wars music.
That would be funny.
see, it's funny you say that because in all seriousness, I didn't pay that much attention when I first saw it to the music. I did this time and was surprised by just how many different little musical nuggets they threw in there from specifically A New Hope. Like you had some of Leia's theme, you had some of the Rebel blockade run, some of the music from the attack of the Death Star, some of the music from rescuing Leia from the Death Star. Like I was surprised, and like I said, that's part of why I realized just how well that specifically these two episodes captured the atmosphere of specifically A New Hope. Like I don't believe it was Kevin Kiner that, I'm going to look it up for sure. Who was it that did the soundtrack for Star Wars Rebels? I don't think it was Kevin Kiner who did Clone Wars, and I know for sure it wasn't John Williams.
And it wasn't the other guy who did Rogue One.
I'm wrong. It was Kevin Kiner. Okay. So yeah, more power to Mr. Kiner for throwing those little audio cues in there from A New Hope into the score of these episodes. So anyways, to wrap it all up, or the last talking point, because we've talked about the story and we talked about the characters kind of intertwined with the story. The last thing we want to talk about, and we already have, but let's hit it one more time, the animation style. So looking at it, we already talked about what you guys thought of it when you first saw it. What do you think of the animation style now?
Well, it does kind of feel stop motion to me a little bit. I used to really dislike that. Now that I've seen the show, I think three times all the way through now. I'm pretty sure 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of overlook it now. I don't really mind it as much. There are
Right.
two of my favorite Star Wars characters that it really just rubs me the wrong way with the way they did it. One of them being Darth Vader. Another one we'll cover later as.
Let me guess, you play as him a lot in Battlefront 2 and use specifically that skin?
Actually, no, not him.
Okay.
No. My second favorite Star Wars character, PJ, you know.
Could it possibly be some blue character in a white uniform?
No, if anything, he's talking about a certain wise Jedi Master.
Oh.
Yeah. And I do kind of have to agree with you on that one. But
nope, not a Jedi Master.
Okay, I get it. I get it.
You get it now, yeah.
Yes. So, Nate, what about you? You already said what you thought of the animation at first. What do you think of it now?
So I do gotta agree with Ian on that. It did feel like it was a much lower, I guess, frames per second in terms of the rate that we were seeing everything. Ironically, the human eye can only really perceive about 30 frames per second.
which is funny.
Yes, considering we're like, oh, as gamers, like, oh no, I dropped a frame.
Yeah,
Sad
60
face.
60 FPS or nothing, man.
Oh, what are you talking about? 144 hertz or not? So that did take a little bit of getting used to. Of course, the style has grown on me more and more, and I do agree. Not all the characters do I think looked the greatest in that particular art style. Like growing up with seeing Vader in the way that I have, I didn't really care for that particular stylistic art of him, though comparing it to Ralph's work again, it still looked pretty good and comparable. Um, Ahsoka, when we see her later on, I really didn't care for her art design in it.
That's the character I was talking about.
Oh, I thought you
Oh.
were talking about Anakin.
No, Ahsoka. We don't really get much of Anakin.
We get a hologram of him in season 2.
Yeah, but
think that's about it.
That's about it. I think it.
Mhm.
So Ahsoka, I really disliked her animation. She looked the best to me. Season 7, last section of season 7. That was you. It was the best animation they could have ever done on her, and
I agree on that one.
Yeah. I
and
will
it's-
say the characters that were from Clone Wars that transitioned over to Rebels, those are the ones that I tended to not like the most.
Mhm.
Right. For me, keeping it limited to just these 2 episodes, the things that bothered me the most design-wise was Vader himself
Mhm.
because he looked too angry, and the stormtroopers because they looked too frowny.
See, to me, it's not that Vader looks angry. It's just that his head looks too skinny.
Yes.
It looks taller and
Eh.
skinnier than it does in, say, that last episode of Clone Wars.
Like
Or
Dooku from the Clone Wars, his head looks too tall and skinny.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although the one thing I will say about Vader in that particular art style is you can clearly see one of the influences that both Lucas and Ralph McQuarrie had,
Mhm.
and that was by a filmmaker named Akira Kurosawa. He
Seven
was
Samurai.
Japanese, and Seven Samurai. What made me think about that is this thing right over here.
Yes, that people don't like talking about these days. At least that particular design.
Yeah.
Real quick, Matt Cave brings up a good point. He says the first thing that stood out to me were their eyes. They have quote unquote Disney eyes. And I do agree. They 100% have Disney eyes, which again, within the context of 2014 wasn't a bad thing to me, but it was just one of those subtle little things where I could tell this is a Disney product.
What do you mean by Disney eyes? I'm curious now.
Look at the characters' eyes from this show and compare their eyes to, say, Frozen or Tangled or Big Hero 6 or something like that.
Oh,
They're not exactly the same, but they're close.
I see what
Yeah,
you're
they
saying.
tend to be a little bit more rounder.
Yes.
Colors more vivid, perhaps.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying now.
Yeah.
Which again goes back to at first what kind of led me to think that this show was a bit of a downgrade was the fact that overall the colors in this show were brighter compared to the somewhat more gritty and dark atmosphere of certainly the latter half of the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that does change as the series goes on. But it's funny on the Disney eyes. I just think Star Wars. I'm just hearing war going through, TIE fighters screeching by, and then underneath of it, I to a degree have to think of the ending of FMJ.
Mhm.
M-I-C-K-E-Y-M-O-U-S-E.
Yes.
Mickey Mouse.
Okay,
Meanwhile, they're all sitting there marching.
Matt Cave says, overall, I do like the style of the series, but I do like Clone Wars animation better. Me
Gotta
too.
agree. Gotta agree there. Yep.
So, I was going to say something else about the... Okay, so before we log off, let me tell you guys, as someone that's pretty much from the second half of season 2 onward watching all of this for the first time, let me tell you some of the things that I'm certainly looking forward to talking about with this show with you guys, and then we'll call it a night. So like I said, I'm looking forward to talking about how Darth Maul works into this story and ultimately how his story ends, because I had some thoughts about that when I saw that for the first time. Like I said, I didn't see the full episode, but I saw the clip. And I had some things to say. But aside from that, I'm looking forward to seeing Sabine get her hands on the Darksaber and how she trains with it. I'm looking forward to seeing Ezra and how he evolves into a character from a little boy to a full-grown, pretty much man. But what I'm most looking forward to, especially now that I've read the Heir to the Empire trilogy, is how they do Thrawn. And I think it's you could almost say the will of the Force that I've only just recently finished reading the Thrawn trilogy, and now here we are covering a show that he's in. I know we have a ways to go before he actually shows up, but it's kind of funny that the timing lined up like that.
Now, Thrawn is one of the best. I love Darth Vader, one of the best cinematic villains ever. Thrawn is close behind him, I think. For someone not being a Sith, he is, to me, he's what the Empire, I guess what the Empire, like high officers should all be to some extent. Have maybe not quite as, smart or strategic, but they should all like not be idiots. they should be like at least just a little bit farther behind him, because he was excellent as a villain.
Right. Matt Cave says each of the 4 seasons has their own flavor in a good way. And by the way, hello to the legendary Tron. And I do agree with you, Ian, where Grand Admiral Thrawn, as far as how he carries himself, pretty much is the model Imperial officer. Certainly a far cry from these guys.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. But anyways, I think we're going to go ahead and stop it here. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Ian and Nate, for coming on here and talking about this with me. You guys, of course, are welcome to come back next week, where we will be talking about episodes 3 through 6. So that's 4 episodes. And so basically within 3 weeks, we will have season 1 completely done. So this is going to be certainly a shorter... this will be a shorter Animation Friday session than Clone Wars was. I believe every single season in Rebels is 10 episodes. Or is it not like that?
Let me see here.
I don't remember.
Kind of curious now.
Let me look. Okay, so I'm wrong. Season 1 is 15 episodes.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Season 2 is 22. Season 3 is also 22. And season 4 is 15.
That's interesting the way they decided to do that. 15, 22, 22, 15.
Right. But yeah, like I said, so it's not going to be the full 7. It's obviously not going to be the full 7 seasons that Clone Wars was, but I'm looking forward to this ride. So tell you what, guys, would you guys like to come back this coming Sunday and talk Tales of the Jedi with me, because I've decided with me getting back into Animation Friday and watching through Rebels that I'd go ahead and catch myself up on Tales of the Jedi, and we can make our Sunday stream this coming Sunday like a special edition Animation Friday after I talk about the newest Mando episode.
Well, I think since Tales of the Jedi is animation, I think we should save that until after we're done with Rebels.
I don't want
I gotta agree.
Truthfully, I don't want to wait for that. I want to talk about it while it's still at least somewhat new. And right now, truthfully, I really don't have anything else to talk about other than the Mando season 3 episode. I did say I was going to get into the next EU book. I haven't had a chance to do that yet, so why not?
Well, I won't be able to make it this Sunday, so
Okay.
So-
I'll have to see what I got in my schedule.
All right, I gotcha. But in the meantime, guys, we are for real going to go ahead and shut it down. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. And just remember, everyone, the Force is family. And we will see you guys later.